Welcome to Funk You Up, the podcast that gives you the best of functional medicine, nutrition, and wellness in 8 minutes or less.
Welcome back to Funk You Up. This is Michelle Miller, clinical nutritionist.
And this is Diana Orchant, functional medicine registered dietitian-to.
Today's topic is EMFs, which are electromagnetic frequencies. We're hearing about this more and more, and we felt that this was a really important topic since Diana and I have already started to apply a lot of these practices to our own life. We thought we'd like to share it with the audience on what it is, where it can be found, why this might be a problem, and most importantly, what we can do about it.
Yeah, so let's dive into it. So EMFs are electromagnetic fields, which are invisible ranges of radiation. These invisible ranges of radiation are also known as EMRs, which for the sense of understanding it is electromagnetic radiation. And basically, EMFs are the field of wireless communication, whereas EMRs are the radiation that we should actually be concerned about.
So, for instance, obviously Diana's right next to me as we record this. I send a text message to her phone. My phone is sending an EMR, an electromagnetic radiation message, through the electromagnetic field to get to her phone. So it's reasonable enough that both of these are brought into conversation because they're both present and kind of part of this issue that we're discussing. But for the sake of simplicity, we're just going to talk about this greater problem as EMFs.
And interesting that you bring up texting because 5G, which is what our phone uses, emits the most intense type of radiation.
So first, let's just go through and talk about where these EMFs or EMRs can be found so we can have a better understanding of what a widespread issue this is.
So they can be found, as I mentioned, on your cell phones and cell phone towers, via Wi-Fi routers in all of our homes or offices.
Basically any smart devices, right? Any wearables, any things that's like smart appliances, different types of meters, baby monitors.
That's a sad one.
But I mean, anything that's using a Wi-Fi or basically trying to pick up on that type of wireless communication signal.
Right. So Bluetooth is another good example. All the AirPods you see everyone walking around New York City using.
Going cordless.
Yeah.
Cordless was, that was kind of the first step of relying more on this wireless communication and hence more present issues with the EMFs.
And this causes a lot of different controversies and concerns. So, Michelle, tell us what those are.
So I think the biggest thing to start out with is we're concerned about this type of radiation. Just as you wouldn't go inside a microwave, you don't want to be surrounded by radiation. I think that's all a pretty simple concept. But because it creates free radical damage, and we're starting to realize the impact that these EMFs, EMRs are having on our DNA. And I think some of the different controversies I'll get into in a moment, but we certainly know from a very basic standpoint that we're seeing a lot of very common symptoms picked up here. Things like headaches and fatigue, issues with concentration or irritability, restlessness, even building up to things like anxiety, depression, nausea. I've even seen some concerns with moving into an early onset Alzheimer's or dementia because of the effect these EMFs are having on the mitochondria and DNA and how that's affecting our brain function.
And not to mention, we're all pretty addicted to our phones, which, as Michelle said, we have a lot of anxiety and depression going around, and that can make it even worse. So it's kind of like, what's the chicken or the egg, the EMF or the phone addiction that we're seeing? Absolutely.
We've also seen a number of reports that are now tying EMFs as one potential element of triggering infertility issues, even things like ADHD, autism. So we're concerned about this. I mean, I was even just reading something recently about a link between the EMFs and how this could affect like the cardiac arrhythmias and, can this mess with our body's own electromagnetic field?
Yeah, and then we're seeing all of these issues with reproduction in general, and people are having issues getting pregnant or issues with their fertility or anything of that nature. And a lot of this is not necessarily caused by, but we have seen in research a correlation between increased exposure of EMFs showing lower levels of various sex hormones, whether it be estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, things like that.
Our EMF exposure has increased about 1 quintillion times.
crazy.
Over the past 100 years. Genetically speaking, we have not evolved that quickly. We are being bombarded with these things. And, we're just beginning to learn some of the ramifications and issues and kind of impact of these EMFs. But we would be so naive to think that this wasn't going to be doing anything and that our bodies were designed to be able to handle quintillion times more of this EMFs than the 100 years ago we were even being faced with.
Yeah, it's really just another chronic stressor that unfortunately it's completely unavoidable, but it can be minimized. So let's dive into some of those tips for minimizing EMF exposure.
So I think a lot of us are constantly addicted to having our phones nearby. And I think that's one of the first things you can start with. When you're not using your phone, consider turning it on airplane mode. That's a really easy thing. I've also had mention of the AirPods. And so using wires might need to be a trend that comes back. I understand maybe if you're doing some specific exercise and you want to use, your AirPods for that one moment, but especially in the city that we're in. I mean, people are walking around with headphones in all the time. I think it is a good idea let's go back to the wires so that we're not constantly having that message go into our ears near our brain.
Yeah.
All the time.
Another good tip is either turn your wireless router off at night or just in general when you're not using it and you're in your apartment or home or anything like that. Or you can get a Wi-Fi shield to cover your wireless router to reduce EMFs in your home.
Yeah, I love the idea of putting the routers or modems on a switch so that it's easy to turn it on and off.
Right.
It doesn't disrupt you. Some people do timers, which is interesting. And I think that's a really good way of kind of making sure you're disabling devices by a certain time. It's probably going to help sleep and kind of sleep hygiene in that way. You don't have to make this a huge inconvenience to your day-to-day life. And also knowing that there could be some health benefits at the other end, it gives you a little bit of motivation to try these things out.
Exactly.
Now, I think this is also a good time to think about a bedroom, you're trying to sleep, maybe taking some inventory of what are all of the devices that are even present in your personal space, right? Are there lots of devices that are on? Are there, do you see lights on? Do you have a TV in your room? What are all of these areas where more EMFs could be exposed that we could really reduce the impact?
Yeah. Is your wireless router near your room? Are you reading on your iPad before you go to bed, followed by looking at your cell phone? Yeah. There's just so many different things that we don't think about.
Definitely.
That we could minimize, especially at night when we're sleeping anyways.
Yeah. I think also I've seen more awareness about not carrying your cell phone on your physical body and trying to separate it. So not putting it in your pocket, but maybe putting it in a purse or a backpack, or, when you get to your destination, kind of like setting it out on a table to the side so that it's not on your physical body. I think finding some distance and distancing yourself is probably one of the best things we can do with EMFs, because again, I do think some people are going to be extremely vulnerable to this, and maybe they need to find that they have to make their environment almost completely EMF free. But if those of us who haven't really noticed the impact yet, we just need to start recognizing that this is an issue and start distancing ourselves from the EMFs overall.
Yeah, and there are some cell phone cases out there now where the ones that have really, I think, been shown the most to work is ones that cover your phone on all aspects. Like all sides of your phone are really covered, kind of like a little notebook. So some people may like that, some people may not, but it really could work. So
yeah, I mean, our goal is to just reduce that extra exposure that we've been getting, not to completely turn your life upside down and like have you live an Amish paradise, but more so just, again, reduce exposure and educate those around you too, because unfortunately, this is a growing area of science that I'm afraid we're going to learn more about when it becomes a little too late in the game. So Please share this episode with your friends and family, and we'd love to hear from you. What are the things that you're doing already to be aware of EMFs in your life and to slowly cut down your exposure, kind of distancing yourself more and more from these EMFs?
Yeah, so thank you so much for joining us today. If you have any questions, please reach out to us at Physio Logic NYC, or reach out to us via email at funkyouup@physiologicnyc.com.
We'll catch you next time.
You've been listening to Funk You Up. Be sure to like, review, and subscribe for more daily tips on living well.